Welcome to the Sexy Freedom Media Podcast, a place to discuss pain, passion, and pursuits.
Let's get it. I want to feel alive.
Breathe.
Make some moves.
Protect the throne. This is Sexy Freedom Media Podcast.
Welcome to the Sexy Freedom Media Podcast. It's your host, Helen Edwards-Ann.
January Liddell, aloha.
Today we have an amazing guest for you, and we'd love for her to introduce herself. Welcome, CJ.
Hi, thanks, Helen and January. I'm so happy to be here. I'm CJ. I am a certified sex coach, and I focus on liberating women midlife and older in the sexual space through alternative pleasure like kink and non-monogamy.
That sounds awesome. I'm so happy to meet you, CJ. That is definitely a realm that I think is not talked about as often as we should. And so I appreciate you coming here on our podcast. So yesterday we were talking to another woman, and she was talking about menopause, and we wanted to kind of steer that direction in that way since we just spoke about it. It's a new episode, and we'd love to hear your side of that story about menopause, because the sexual health is associated with that. Because from what I'm hearing is that we may not be feeling as sexy or feeling that type of sexualness during menopause. So if you can share with us your story, that would be wonderful.
Sure, absolutely. I think this is really important, and I'm so grateful for you for providing a space for people to talk about their experiences in menopause, because the more information that's out there, the more that people will feel like there isn't something wrong with them, because there isn't. You know, it is a journey that is very complex, and the healthcare system doesn't really support us in the ways that it could at this time. And for a lot of people, it's more difficult. So I am just realizing I am 57. I'm actually not postmenopausal yet. I was a late bloomer with starting my periods, and I'm a late bloomer in terms of menopause. The average age, I believe, is 51 for menopause to actually be like final. And so I'm a little bit behind schedule on that. So that might be someone else's experience as well. But also, a lot of people do go through menopause way earlier. There's surgical menopause, when you have your ovaries removed, all sorts of reasons, which I don't need to get into. But in terms of what I'm learning about it for myself, I realize, like, wow, this actually has been a process, a part of my life as a person with ovaries and a uterus that I am going through. I've been going through it for years. And I've actually had a lot of grieving recently, because the more I learn, the more it's sort of like going back in time into my early 40s or even late 30s and realizing, like, wait a second, those moments of like depression, anxiety, rage, those are coming up for me as like question marks in terms of, was that actually my hormones starting to shift and things getting a little wonky like they do in perimenopause? And my experience was, I had young kids. I had my kids at 36 and 38. So my kids were young. And if you have kids, you know what you're going to identify probably with this. They can trigger you in all the ways that you never even knew. Like, they're going to push all the buttons. And I wasn't in the most like health. It was a good marriage, but it wasn't meeting either one of our needs at some stage. So there were moments of just utter rage that I felt bubbling up, and those scared me. And I ended up on SSRIs. And it didn't feel aligned with me. Being on an antidepressant did not feel aligned with me at that time, but it felt like something necessary. And I feel like if I had gotten more detailed support around perimenopause, and maybe I could have tried some hormone replacement at that time, that would have changed things for me. But for someone my age, and there is still a lot of fear around taking hormone replacement therapy for so many people. There was just this like looming information out there about if you take estrogen, you will get breast cancer or you increase your risk of breast cancer. And that study that information was based on has largely been, I don't want to say debunked, but it's been looked at a little bit more closely, and people are figuring out what the holes were in that, because the women that were in that study, the people that were in that study were actually postmenopausal. So there's a lot more data out now. HRT is on the rise. It is a piece of the puzzle that for so many of us, it's really important for not only the experience of menopause, but for longevity. And that's where I'm at, right? I'm getting older. Both my parents are declining really quickly in their late 70s and early 80s. And I'm like, oh, wait a second, this is around the corner for me. And I'm looking ahead to the future for what's going to be cognitive protection for me, muscle protection, overall health. And the information that I'm putting together from the experts is that HRT is super helpful for most of us. And once I finally was like, all right, I relent. And also because I had been listening to the experts, I was like, I need to give this a try. And a huge reason why I decided to do that is because I heard that there's some new information about it being brain protective. So that's something in my family that's I'm very concerned about. So that's just a little slice of my story.
It's interesting that you should bring up hormone replacement therapy, HRT, because
Yeah.
I'm actually in the midst of all of that. And I like how you mentioned we all do have different walks of life into this journey, into this season of perimenopause and menopause, because one of the things I was thinking about actually earlier this morning was I wonder if there's anybody who can talk on the subject of having a hysterectomy, and then basically that kind of jump starts them into perimenopause or menopause. And I know my sister went through that in her early 30s. I mean, very young. And for me, I just had a hysterectomy, gosh, 2 years ago, I want to say 2 years ago. And it was everything changed after that. And I kept my ovaries. And the doctor kept saying, oh, well, you keep your ovaries. Everything's going to be normal. You're going to go through a normal ghost periods, he called them. And I thought, okay, great. This is a great deal. No, my hormones went berserk. My testosterone dropped completely. I didn't know what was wrong with me. They kept saying, oh, maybe you just need some testosterone to kickstart your testosterone. And then I found out it was so low that they're now saying you have to be on this forever. And that was new to me. And even when they say that, they don't go into detail of how much the amount you need. I was too high the first time. I was too low the next dosage. And now they're wondering, oh, maybe your estrogen is too low, or maybe you don't have any of that. So then I went and got a whole blood panel done. And not to give all the information about my health life, my medical life, but maybe this can help somebody out there. But I recently got it done and I found out my testosterone was so high and my estrogen was so low. And I thought, okay, now what do? Do I get more estrogen to even it out, or do I lower the dose of of testosterone, you know, I'm asking for answers and it's been a headache trying to get the answer from the doctor. It's always, oh, I'll call you back. Oh, I'm not sure. Or we can try this if you want to try this. And I'm like, if we want to try this, I don't know what I'm doing. So I love that you mentioned the estrogen part of it and how there's a fear of getting breast cancer, because honestly, that was my first thing. I was like, ooh, I don't want to get more estrogen. I'm scared I'm gonna get breast cancer. So I'm glad we're talking about this, because that was one of my fears. Will I get breast cancer if I get a little bit of estrogen?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for all of that. This is so many of us, that's our story. It's like, we don't know, tell us what to do. And we're asking the people that we think are going to know and they don't know. And it's not necessarily their fault. I'm not blaming doctors because God knows why, because half the population, if we're lucky, is going to experience this, right? This is a natural process. It's like the focus is on, reproduction and having babies. And then it's almost like we're just disposable after that. Like, okay, you've done your job, bye-bye. And no, I'm just like, nope, nope, we're not going to be that. This is important. I'm still a sexual being. I'm still a human. And I want to be healthy as I age, not just in terms of my sexuality, but my brain and my muscles and all the things. So here's the bad news. And it's the good news that you have a lot of control, that you have agency over your health. Okay. You need to be your best advocate. You need to take responsibility and learn stuff. And a lot of us, like myself, because of a variety of reasons, mistrust of pharmaceutical companies or belief in other alternative things, which that has been me for a long time. I'll take drugs when I need them, but I'm not the person who will just automatically go on a prescription drug. And I had this sort of mindset of like HRT as being like in that category, but it's not. Hormones are hormones, they're in everyone's body. And estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, they are not sex hormones. They are hormones that live in all humans and in different parts of the body. But for us, ovaries are the main producers of a lot of our hormones. And then at a particular time of life, those start to change, right? And what we're doing is just supporting what we already had. If we don't, suddenly we have this huge drop, or it's a slow decline, or it's all over the map, we think we're crazy, right? We experience so like physical pain. I had joint pain. I had flu-like symptoms a lot, like body aches. Like, what is this? Right? My brain was like crawling through sludge. That is no fun, you know? And taking replacement hormones for me, even years later, has been a game changer. So be your own best advocate and get the information. There is so much good information out there right now. Like, we are still suffering from that misinformation about breast cancer and the real fear of that. And we are coming to terms with like new emerging research. And there's two experts that I would recommend. Dr. Mary Claire Haver, whose book is called The New Menopause. Fantastic book. Follow her on Instagram. She is fabulous. And the other person who changed things for me is Dr. Kelly Casperson, who is a urologist, and her book is You Are Not Broken, and she has a podcast. And I listen to the podcast still because I'm still learning things. Testosterone for me is like my latest like experiment. I'm because I'm like, okay, I feel good, but I know I can feel better. Let me try this thing. For me, it's more related to my libido and also my brain. So I'm like, all right, I would like to try this. And that's a difficult one. There's a lot of gatekeeping because there is a lack of knowledge. So you have to find the doctor who knows, or there's a ton of online places where you can do telehealth medicine. And sadly, a lot of times you have to pay for that. And it's just getting the information and deciding what path works well for you.
I loved everything you had to say. In fact, I took a lot of notes because this is vital. It's vital for me. I believe that we should be learning this at an earlier age so that we'll be more prepared for when we're younger. So this conversation, along with Allie's from yesterday, I did want to mention her,
Yes.
Allie Hendry. So I wanted to mention these two episodes will be great to really listen to and tune into. So I did want to ask you a few questions because you mentioned some 3-letter words, 4-letter words that I'm actually not familiar with. And maybe some of our listeners are also not familiar, but what is SSRI and what is HRT?
Okay. So an SSRI, well, okay, I'm not a medical doctor, but it is like antidepressants. They're pharmaceuticals for mental health, right? And HRT is hormone replacement therapy. And there is also, I believe, MHT, which is menopause hormone therapy. So you'll hear different terminology depending on what's going on. This is fascinating. Just a little sidebar. There's so much research. Like, I love Dr. Casperson because she talks about, like, oh, we don't know how testosterone affects people assigned female at birth, which is not true because the people who are transitioning into being a man from a woman, trans men, experience um, testosterone in larger doses than what we would be getting like going through menopause. So there is research out there, like they've been given and been taking testosterone longer. So it's really interesting. Like there's so much cool stuff going on in trans health that can be like, they have some of the knowledge, right? And it appears to be less gatekeeping around that than for those of us just going through the menopause experience as a woman, right? So it's fascinating, but there's all these like, oh, you don't want to do that, or oh, it's this, or oh, it's your new normal, like stuff like that, like that dismissive sort of thing that you'll get from your family or friends, but worse, doctors or medical professionals who are like, oh, just get used to it. Like, just say goodbye to pleasure, say goodbye to whatever. Like, you're just going to have to suffer through it. I'm like, that's a no. Like, that's a no for me. No, I don't accept that. Like, it sounds like a challenge. Now I need to figure this out. So, yeah, I just invite you to question and get curious about what's going on in your body. It's important.
It's like you said, take responsibility. And that's one of the things I am big on is taking responsibility because responsibility is power.
It is.
So that's great that you said that and reminded me of that because that's actually something I started doing this morning is I read books every day and I decided to put down my finance book and pick up The Upgrade by Dr. Louanne Brizadine, who I just love. And I started my journey in empowering myself and like you said, get more control and advocate for yourself. So I appreciate that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Another thing you mentioned was the testosterone, which I did end up getting testosterone in my HRT. And I remember when my hormones started going bonkers, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I've lost a big part of myself. And a big part of myself was my sexuality, my sexual desire, my libido. And when that started plummeting, I felt like I had lost a part of myself. And you're talking about grieving. I remember when that happened for me. And that's when I started on my journey of asking the doctor, what's going on? I can't live like this. I'm too young not to desire sex and have sex and all this stuff around sex. I mean, it's important to me to have a good sexual relationship with my husband. So, of course, I looked into it. Now, I kind of want to shift this into this subject because it is one of my favorite subjects, and I love your background and I want to know more about it. So, the question I'm going to ask is, how does hormonal change during menopause affect sexual desire and pleasure, and what strategies can help enhance libido during this stage of life?
Hmm. Here's the thing. It's going to affect everybody differently, right? And my experience through menopause is not going to be the same as yours. There are certain commonalities that we can say, and hot flashes are one of those things, right? Like it's always, that's the thing we don't mind talking about for whatever reason, or it's like we joke about it. It's like, oh, whatever. It's disappointing that that's the focus of the conversation when it's so much more, right? And when it comes to pleasure and sex, we're all going to go through different experiences at different times. And even though I was experiencing that, like a real increase in anxiety when my kids were young, and now I also realize that that's related to a drop in estrogen. I was also, my libido was off the charts. Like I literally felt like a teenage boy might feel. And I just kept thinking to myself, oh my God, like I have to like enjoy this as long as I can because menopause will come and steal it all away from me. And I had this like urgent sense of urgency around that. And up until recently, that has been true because I'm a late bloomer in this space. Lucky me. Not for everybody. But once I realized, like, oh, guess what? Like, pleasure is feeling a little bit harder to get to. I don't have as much desire that I did. I don't have that urge to go out and reach out to my partner, to my husband. I'm not feeling the same sense of urgency anymore. But also, like, there's a disinterest almost, right? And that's when I'm like, I do not accept this. Just like you, like I was grieving that, and like, okay, so this is where I am. There's an acceptance of this is what my body is doing right now, but also like, how can I support my body? And it's the body, it's the hormones, but it's also the relationship that you're in or relationships, and also like your mental health and the connection. And I mean, what are the things that get in the way of sex? Like if there's resentment or anger or stress, those sorts of things disconnect us. And then add on top of that hormonal changes that can be really problematic, right?
So I love, yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So what can we do in terms of, I know you mentioned really taking care of our mental health, really connecting with our relationships and seeing it as, and accepting that stage of our life and where our body is at. So what else can we do to increase or enhance our libido? What other strategies can we use?
Yeah. Well, there's so many different things. I think one of the first things is that this is also related to agency and being your own best advocate, because you need to do that for yourself in the sexual space as well, right? You have to have a voice. You deserve a voice. What does sex mean to you? What does pleasure mean to you? Maybe it's not the same pleasure that you were experiencing 10 years ago or 20 years ago, or even last year. It could be shifting. But the good news is that sexual pleasure, there's an array of things that could fall under that umbrella, right? It's not, if you're in a heterosexual relationship, it tends to be penis and vagina, but that's not the only thing that can, that is part of sexual pleasure, right? So there's that. Don't believe what society is telling you. Do not believe that society, what society says about aging, that, oh, it's your new normal, you're too old, don't worry about it. You have to throw that in the trash and you have to prioritize this. It's not something, there's so many different factors going on, the stress of life, hormonal changes, that you actually have to make it a priority and pay attention to it and connect with your partner and have those conversations. Also, let's talk about the elephant in the room. We don't feel necessarily sexy when we're going through all this, right? How do you tap into your sexy part when you're like weight gain or sluggishness or not even being able to communicate because you have brain fog or you're hot and sweaty or you have itchy skin? I mean, there's so many different things that could be going on that you don't understand. You don't even necessarily know that they're related to that, right? So how are you going to feel sexy? Well, figure that out. Go, like, leave behind the naysayers, leave behind where you don't feel seen or attractive, because we like to erase people out of the world at certain stages, or people who, whatever, they present a certain way. We like to erase people. Don't buy into that. Be seen, but go where you're appreciated. Go where you can be seen for who you are. Something that I started doing in my 40s was pole dancing. And, you know, the studio where I went to, they didn't have mirrors. And that was really helpful because I could feel sexy. I may not have looked sexy because I was a novice, right? But I could feel sexy. It got me into my body. Get into your body. And that's hard to do when your body doesn't feel great. But find the places where your body does feel good. It could be pole dancing. It could be burlesque. Burlesque is really like, it's playful, it's fun, and it can be really sexy. You could develop a whole new persona around that. It could be something playful. It could be something really sultry, naughty, like an alter ego. You could explore something like shibari, which is getting tied up. Be a piece of art tied up in beautiful rope. Something like that might make you feel sexy, not the generic like look that society constantly pushes on us, but like, what is the feeling of feeling sexy and confident? Go there.
You said it best earlier, and you said, be your own advocate. And I think that was the one thing, if anything, if I was to get anything from our conversation so far, is that be your own advocate. I love that you mentioned different ways of feeling sexy, and it's really up to the person, right? It's up to what it is that makes us feel sexy in the body and space and time that we're in. I know for me, I look back on my pictures when I was in my 20s, my 30s, and I'm like, oh, where did my body go? Where did that Jan go? And it's not me. That's another chapter way in the past. And now I'm in this chapter. And so I appreciate you sharing just the different methods of, and I like what you said, where I am appreciated, where I feel good, and where I feel joy. Because you're right, we can have all of these things that I know for me, I'm the weight gain, the brain fog, just the feeling icky in our body and not really feeling like we're in our skin because all of these different changes that are going on. I believe I'm in perimenopause. I think that's where I'm at because I feel menopause is when you have 12 months of consecutive no periods. And so that's exactly the day when there's where you're at menopause. But premenopause, man, when you started talking about like earlier and how all that rage, all that anxiety and just anger or whatever, that may have all been a culmination or like it's included in perimenopause. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no wonder. Because I feel when I do get into my rage, like this morning, because you were talking about your child and how, like, I just had that this morning and I was so annoyed. And I was annoyed because of how he responded to me. But then I had to step back. I'm like, well, he was trying to explain to me why he said what he said. But I'm realizing now that it may have been just a part of my hormones that are acting up. So, with that said, let's see, there's other questions that we'd like to.
I'd like to bring that up actually,
Yeah.
the annoyance part, because I know we talked about that through email and wanted to bring it up and discuss it because I often get really annoyed. I don't have small kids around me. I know my nephew's visiting, but he doesn't really count. There's nothing he's done that's triggered me. But my husband, it's just me and him. I have a 25-year-old son, but he's in the military. So we don't have any pets. We don't even have any plants. My life is great, to be honest. There should be nothing bothering me. But sometimes I'm so annoyed. I'm so frustrated. My husband's done nothing wrong. I've done nothing wrong. And I think to myself, why am I so mad? And so I pull out my tools. I work out. I work out angry. And I'm thinking, okay, this is going to do it. Nope, it didn't fix it. I pull out my tinctures. I do all the tinctures I have that are supposed to help better my mood, which they do. They cut the edge. But then I'm still like, why? I should be grateful, which I get grateful. So what I'm saying is I do all the things, but nothing's really getting to the source of it. Nothing's really stabilizing me. What do I do on those days? What do you suggest? What have you felt this where you're just like, okay, I'm sitting here, I'm putting on the seatbelt. I need to figure this out before I stand up.
I think so many of us can relate to this, and we don't talk about it because it's embarrassing. We feel shame around it, and we also feel broken, like something's wrong with us. Because, like you said, my life is great. Why do I feel this way? And may I make an observation about what I'm hearing? I'm hearing you go through the things that you've done or the things that you've learned to get curious about yourself and to support yourself in the ways that you know. And I'm feeling like there's a little bit of like, there is something wrong with me because I can't fix this right now. And I want to invite you into acceptance on some level that this is probably hormonal, and tinctures and journaling are great, except when it's an issue that's not going to help, right? And it's not about something underneath the anger and like you're trying to get to the root cause. It could just be very simple. Your hormones are crazy right now. And maybe you just need some support in that area. And by the way, I would say deep dive on the hormone stuff. And it doesn't mean test your blood levels of hormones all the time, because that is crazy making. Don't need to do that. Like, you're of the age, you're experiencing this, and that's what it is. It's a decline in those hormones. So rather than waiting for the appointments 2 months from now, whatever, like get on top of it and say, I would like to try this. Like, I want to try whatever systemic estrogen to see if I feel better because I'm experiencing this like extreme annoyance issue and it's impacting my relationship. Um, whatever it is, like you need to go in and ask for the thing, not wait for them to tell you what's okay to take. Because, like, get to that stage of what you know each thing does, and you ask for that. And when they like throw up the roadblocks because they don't know, or for whatever reason, you have the answers. Okay. So that's what I suggest you do more than anything, and keep up that communication, with your partner, and just be like, look, invite them in. I know you talked about this with Allie. Great, great interview. Bring your partner on the journey with you. Like, my husband is learning so much about menopause because I'm learning about menopause, because I'm like, oh my God, this is what it probably is. Okay. This is what's happening. And suddenly I was like, hold on a second. I'm having incontinence. Not suddenly. I'd had stress incontinence for years, which is when you cough or sneeze and you pee, right? Well, I mentioned that to urgent care when I had a severe cough, and I said, I'm tired of peeing my pants. And she was like, you need to get to a urologist. Why did it take me into my late 50s to realize I need a urologist? Like, no one ever told me that. No one told me you shouldn't be peeing your pants when you sneeze. Like, it isn't necessarily what happens at your age or after you have kids. Like, you can do things to fix this. Maybe. And if not, it could be surgery. Whatever it is, like, your options are there and you need to be able to go for them. So, yeah, you just do as much as you can, but also and support yourself, but also like you can't self-care your way out of like bottomed out hormones, you
That's a
know?
really good statement. I like that you said that because there is shame around it. There's a lot of shame of asking questions, and how you said ask, just communicate. We often talk about it in our relationships all the time, but not with the people that are really important, like the doctors that we go see and get personal with. So I like that you said that. But I also want to ask, in regards to peeing your pants or sneezing, I know a lot of people, no names, but I know some people my age and friends my age who are starting to have that happen, and we laugh about it now, but it can get worse or serious if we don't address it. So what do you suggest, or are there any suggestions you can make for us to do in that aspect?
Go to a urologist. Don't wait. Just be like, look, okay, if you suspect something, this is what I do. If I'm like, okay, I think there might be an issue here. Like, I go to my doctor's appointment and I say, I have a question about this thing. I think I might need to see someone like a particular type of doctor. Or what do you suggest? And they're like, oh, that's not my expertise. And they send you to somebody. And that's how I ended up at the urologist. And so go to a urologist, because gynecologists typically focus on reproductive health and having babies. Okay. They're really good at that, and they're not necessarily good at pelvic health in general. And that means also urinary health. Okay. For stress incontinence, I am now doing pelvic floor therapy at my age. Like, okay, like I wish I had done this earlier, because there are other things that can occur too. Just because things move, and when your muscles loosen, or you're going through a drop in hormones, there can be prolapse and things like that. So it's good to have a urologist. And chronic UTIs I mean, so many people experience that. I don't experience that, but I started learning that in particular as we age, and this was something that came up for someone close to me, that UTIs when you're older for women can be, they can actually exhibit as confusion and dementia, but it's actually a UTI. Like you can suddenly have like mass confusion, men as well, but less so. It's more common for women to experience UTIs. Um, and that can actually be prevented or largely prevented by estrogen cream. And it's what keeps our tissues healthy, right? So having something like having a doctor like a urologist and asking them those questions, I did say that to my doctor. I said, look, what do you think about estrogen cream? I'm on the estrogen patch. What do you think about me using this? Because I was also experiencing discomfort with penetrative sex. And I said, what about, UTIs? Like, I don't get them a lot, but I'm also like, I know someone who's going through cognitive decline later in life. Like, how can I help with that? And just the whole UTI thing, how it gets more common, becomes more common as we age. And she said, would you like to be proactive or reactive? And I said, proactive, please. And she's like, let's get you on an estrogen cream. So that's what we did.
What the urologist mentioned to me was that they can do a camera, so they can insert a camera and just see, the lining of the wall. At this point, he said it's not necessary at this point. It's quite fascinating that a urologist is a man. However, fascinating to me, right? I feel like there should be more women urologists in any case. He mentioned about this video and he said, at this point, let's just monitor. So I'm in the monitoring phase of it all. And just like yourself, the whole proactive, what would you like to do? And I think that's one thing that even Helen and I, when we talk about, in our podcast, is really being your own, self care, your own self advocate for yourself, because really we're the ones who know ourselves, our bodies much better than anybody else. And if we don't have that voice or use that voice, then no one's going to really know. So one of the
Yes.
things that you mentioned earlier too was just bringing your partner on the journey. So I'm bringing my partner on this journey, but I'm also bringing my kids because we all live
I
together.
love that.
It's
I
so
love that.
vital because I don't want
Yes.
to think it's their fault, when certain things, when my rage just goes up there, I'm like, so Allie actually called it a name yesterday. I'm going to call her Lady M. I
I
love
love
it.
that.
So
I love
Lady M may come and I'm like, please forgive Lady M. She's going to show up every now and then. Just say, Lady M,
that. Yes.
okay, you're here. I see you, but go in your corner.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because what you're doing is you're destigmatizing it. It's a normal human process, people. Like, why do we stigmatize this stuff? Like, same thing with sex. It's not something that needs to be, shameful and hidden away in the closet. And that's why we're suffering, right? And if I don't know what gender your kids are, but it's like if they're going to experience menopause someday, then this will be wonderful for them. Or if they're supporting a partner who's going through that too. It's just like, look, it's a normal part of the body's process and it's difficult. It's probably one of the hardest things that most of us will experience.
So I want to segue into sex because when we do have this situation, because our partners are going to be affected by this. So how can women over 40 improve no, I'm sorry. How can us as women over 40 improve our dryness or discomfort? And you mentioned that you were having issues with penetration and how that hurt you. So what can we do? What are some effective ways that we can use to fix that situation?
Sure. Okay, so what happens with the decline in estrogen is that the tissue's thin, right? And things just probably feel different. So estrogen replacement through cream in that area can help. By the way, I did the prescription that was given to me and I was having a reaction to it. And I was really like, my vulva was not happy. It was super angry. Like it just started getting like really irritated and I didn't put it together that it was a cream. So I ended up having to get a compounded cream, sadly, because it costs money. But just so you know, like you have to play around with these things. It's not always a quick fix. Okay, so the urologist can be very important with this too, as well as a gynecologist. Like I told my gynecologist, I'm feeling like I'm getting bumped in certain areas that doesn't feel good, or it's more sensitive, or it's painful. And so going through the medical process, I just had an ultrasound this week, and this was months ago that I said this. Now I need a biopsy. So you can't necessarily do all the things on your own. Get the ultrasounds, get whatever you need, like say the thing, because it might seem like, oh, I'm just sensitive. Well, now I need a biopsy. There might be something going on. So, it's fine, but that's what I'm talking about. Like, don't try to wing it on your own. Like, always pay attention to what your body is telling you, because I think with the sort of like stigmatization of the menopause experience, we don't voice what's happening because we have shame around it. And there just isn't a lot of knowledge. We're dismissed, there's gatekeeping, whatever. So you really, really, really have to keep going, keep going, asking questions. So there's that. Lube, 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 lube is important. You know, get the right lube. If you are fluid bonded with your partner, meaning you're not using barriers, you can use maybe something like coconut oil. A lot of people love coconut oil. Make sure you get a lube that isn't going to cause yeast infections, things like that. If you're using toys, make sure that they're compatible with the type of lube that you're using. All of those things. Lube is, great. And, some people like to use saliva. It's not going to work all the time anymore. Like you're going to need something that lasts a little bit longer. So there's that. Um, communication, communicate, and get curious about like, what else could sex be, right? Because it doesn't just have to be a penis and a vagina and penetration. It can be so much more. Sex starts in the brain, right? It might take you longer to warm up. You might need a little bit of like sexting throughout the day with your partner. Like, why not do those things? Why not, have a nice little massage session or something like a role play or something different to spice it up and to open it up to what sex could actually be for you. From now on, it's something, things are going to shift as we age and we can get really creative. We don't have to be stuck in the box.
Wow. You've given both of us a lot to think about, and I'm sure our audience as well. I definitely have a lot of takeaways already, and you've reminded me to do the fun stuff, but also take responsibility and have
Yeah.
a beautiful dance with that, in other words. So
Mm.
I feel very empowered, and I want to thank you, CJ, for being so open and sharing your experiences, because you've been very vulnerable, and and it's so important that you shared this, because women like us look to women like you and want to know. We're desperate to know. We're scared. We're vulnerable. We're confused. They're all the emotions. And when you take moments like this to explain your experience, you're empowering us, you're inspiring us, but you're also letting us know we're not alone. You're the trailblazer, and if you can do it, we can do it, and we're going to be okay. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. January, do you have any last words to say to CJ?
CJ, thank you. I felt lots of love. I felt no shame. I felt that I'm not broken. I felt that this is going to be a beautiful, beautiful journey that's going to probably go up and down like this. However, as long as we are our own advocates, as long as we're curious, as long as we tune in to other women. So I just want to mention what you told us. So it's Dr. Mary Clay Haver. She wrote a book called The New Menopause, and she's also on IG. Dr. Kelly Casperson, who's a urologist, and I think she wrote a book, or she has a podcast called You're Not Broken, and a podcast from Dr. Kelly Casperson. These are all great resources. So you have just given us a plethora of tools to use. So I appreciate all those tools. This is definitely, along with Allie's, is another one that I'm going to just listen to. And, you mentioned the word desensitized. And I do love that word, because as we're talking about this, it's making me feel not so scared about this new chapter of our lives. And it's just making me feel like, got this, I can do this. So thank you. Appreciate you so much. Can you let us know, like, if you have any other things that you'd like to share with us, and where can we find you?
Thank you so much. Really, in listening to your podcast, I was feeling this sense of like something's looming for you, and I want to be that person on the other side. Like, I'm older than you, but it's like, no, 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 no. Like, don't buy into that. Like, I know it can seem like overwhelming. And it's like, no, like there's so many opportunities, right? There's so many opportunities coming up that you haven't experienced yet. And just keep your eyes on that, and like constantly say like, no, like that's not enough for me. I want more, right? And pleasure is part of that. So if that speaks to you, I want to hear from you. My business is called No Shame with CJ. Most of my content is on Instagram, No Shame with CJ. And I'm all about taking you on a journey of like, I'm ready to like spice it up and make things really fun. Whatever that looks like for you, it doesn't have to follow my personal journey. But I'm currently offering a coaching package called Erotic Evolution. Yes, because I also believe that expanding our sexual palette and our enjoyment of pleasure in different ways is good for our brains. It's good for our bodies, it's good for our brains. And I want my mind to be blown. And if you want your mind to be blown, come along, follow me on IG, reach out. I've got, I've got some space for coaching. Thank you so much.
So I actually have a urologist.
All right, January, where can they find you?
You can find me on januaryliddell.com. My IG is Anchored Financial LLC and Alina the Honeymaker. You can also find me on Facebook, Anchored Financial LLC, along with my other Facebook page, Alina the Honeymaker. That's where you can find me. And this is my book, Alina the Super Saver. Here she is. So it's a book about children's financial, well, not children, but it's a children's book about financial literacy. So you can find it on Amazon. Helen, where can we find you?
Yes, thank you everybody for listening. You can find me, Helen Edwards, on Sexy Freedom Media, or my handle, Hell of a Journey. I'm all over the place. You can just Google me and you'll find me. You can also get your copy of my infamous book, Nothing Sexier Than Freedom, rated RX for adult language and erotica. Also, check out our sister station, Your Morning Sauce. So thank you so much again. CJ for joining us, and we're going to leave all her links in our show notes, so please check her out. And if you have any questions, you want to leave a review, or you want to share this episode, please do so. Thank you again for everybody listening. Tune in next time. Ahia.
Want to hear more?
Visit us at sexyfreedommedia.com.